With our SVG element created, it's time to visualize the data at line 14, which is our data set. So I'll put my cursor at the bottom of the page and create a new line. And now with the SVG element, which is represented by the SVG variable, I'll type svg.selectAll and then open and close parentheses. I'll select all the elements within the SVG element that have the bar class. Now we haven't added any elements, so you might be wondering, why am I selecting things that we haven't added? Well, in doing this, I'm preparing D3 to bind data to elements that are classed as bar. And so the next thing I need to do is on a new line, type .data, and then pass the source for the data, which is the data variable at line 14. I need to denote that we are in the enter phase. And so we'll learn more about phases later in this course. But for now, we're telling D3 this is the first time that the data is bound. And so we need to bind the data to everything that follows. Indent and type .append and pass in rect. So we're appending a rect element or rectangle element for each piece of data that is bound at line 20, which is this entire data set. So now if we save this, head to the web page and refresh, I'll click Elements, and with the SVG element, you can see I have blank rect elements, and the number equals the total number of pieces of data that I have. Go back to the code, and now I'll set some attributes. I'll set the class attribute by typing .adder, and then class for the first argument and bar for the second. And it's important here that I do this because by setting the class bar, future selections will then be able to select all of the bar classes. And that's really the linkage between line 19 and 23. On a new line, I'll set the X, and we'll set that right now to 0. I'll set the Y, and again, setting that to 0. We'll set the width, and I'll set that to 20, and we'll set the height, and I'll set that to 20. Save that, head to the web page, refresh, and now we see a bar that is 20 pixels wide and 20 pixels high, so it's really a square. Actually, it's every single piece of data piled on top. And so now what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll edit the code so that it uses the data from the data source. So let's first adjust the width of these bars. And to do that, we're going to blank out the 20 that is set for the width and type function. Open and close parentheses, D, I. So our first argument is letter D, second is letter I. Open and close parentheses. So the D stands for the data that is bound to this particular element. And the I stands for the index of the data. So for example, if we were binding 132, which is the first element within the array, that is D, 132, and that is index 0 because we start counting from 0. And so all we need to do here is return D. And what that does is it returns the value for the piece of data that's bound. Save that and refresh. And now what we have is all of the bars on top of each other. And really we're seeing the widest bar, which is I think the 337 right here. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll affect the Y value because we're going to stack these from top to bottom. One thing to note is that here, the Y values will increase as you go from the top of the screen to the bottom. And that's important to remember because typically in a Cartesian plane, the Y's increase from bottom to top. It's the inverse. Go to the code, and for the Y value, we'll blank out the 0 and type function, D, I, and open and close our curly brackets. Now we're going to return the index times the height, which is 20. And so that will stagger the bars. We want a little bit of separation between them, and that's easily done. Go back to the code. We'll just set the height to 19. Save that and refresh. And there we have our data drawn so that we have our bars stacked from top to bottom. The X's are all 0. They're starting at the left. And their widths are literal widths. That is, whatever the value here is in data, that's how many pixels they are literally wide, 132, 71, 337, etc. The way in which we set the widths and as well staggered them, we set the attribute using .attr or the adder function. We denote the attribute to set, and then we use a function in order to calculate the setting or grab the data and calculate it. And so within these functions, D is representative of the data to bind, I is representative of the index of that data. Within the width, we just used the data. Within the Y values, we used the index times the height. It's a lot of steps, but considering how you would normally do this within native JavaScript, D3 makes it really simple.